Okay, what's up guys? Welcome to another exciting tutorial. Today I'm going to be walking you through the process of color grading with Lightroom. It's going to be a 10-part series. We're going to be looking straight from basic tone curves, HSL, split toning, detailing, lens corrections, effects, camera calibrations. Then we're going to have that. Those are 8-part series. Yeah, and then we're going to have two more parts. There's going to be dealing with working with presets and our tools over here. Okay, right here I have 3 images already loaded up. If you don't know, if you're not familiar with loading images or importing images, I already have a video done on that in the introductory tutorial class that we had on Lightroom, so you could get that, go back to that video, and then you figure out how we got that done. Okay, so if you notice, today we have 3 different images. Basically this is what we're working with. The idea is showing us we're going to be working with this particular panel. Okay, so on the basic tab, the first thing we have here, treatments, we could decide to go black and white, and then we could decide to go color. Now in a monochromatic image like this, we do not have anything to do with color, so once you select black and white, it deactivates your vibrance and saturation. If you remember, in our previous class we talked about vibrance and saturation and what they do. If you don't know what it does, you could go back to that class and revisit it. Okay, so if we have color, it brings that back. Okay, so since we're working with black and white images, we could decide to just work with black and white treatments, but then we could also leave it at color, basically, because we're not going to be doing anything. But for the sake of this class, let's leave it at black and white. Okay, so the first thing we have here is white balance. White balance as shot, auto, custom. Now your white balance is everything that has to do with your temperature and tint. Okay, let's say for example we took an image and the image was looking this way, right? Now if you notice, the part that is meant to be pure white is not exactly white, it's a little bit on the yellowish side. So this is a custom white balance automatically because I have already tweaked it, but let's just assume that we had an image that came this way. One thing we could do is you see this particular white balance selector. Once you pick it up, you go to the image, the part of the image that is meant to be white originally. Now this was pure white, so once I click that, you see you can actually pick that. So okay, that was crushed already. That's because the highlight was crushed, that's why I didn't pick that. So I used this particular portion. This is meant to be the highlight, all white. This place is meant to be white, and then you pick that and you see it has balanced everything out to the original image. So that is what your eyedropper tool does. The white balance selector, what it's called on this particular. Okay, so let's say for example, this image, now I'm picking the white balance selector. I go to this portion that is meant to be white, and then it balances the image back. Now, it's usually not very accurate, but it's approximately accurate. Now if you see that, it just gave us a tint of -4 and -1 on the temperature, but that works. It's as close to what it should be originally. Okay, so already with what I've just done, you understand what the temperature does. Temperature is the amount of blues. Yeah, when you're going cold on an image, you have more blues. When you're going warm, you have more yellows. So that is what your temperature is all about, either cold or warm. And those are complementary colors. If you look at the color wheel, those are colors that are exactly opposite on the color wheel. So it's either warm or cold. Exactly. Now on the tint, this is slightly off. If you look at the color wheel again, this is another set of complementary colors: cold, warm. But then on this portion of the warm, you're having more of you see that? So on the tints is the amount of greens and purples that you have. So if you have an image that is looking greenish, all you need to do is push your fader towards the purpley tone and it cancels out your green. So same thing goes for the temperature. Actually, when you have an image that looks cold, when you want to annul that effect, that cold effect, and then bring it closer to what it was originally in a more natural look, you drag it off depending on what you're doing anyway, because sometimes you might want your images to look cold, sometimes you might want them to look warm, depending on the mood of the image. All right, so for the tone, we've got exposure. You definitely know what that does. It increases the brightness all over the image, increases the brightness or reduces the brightness. That's what the exposure does. Then the contrast, you see that contrast has a way of brightening up the highlights and darkening the shadows, so we could have that distinct feel. Like we could see this place is very bright and then this place is very dark. It has that way of giving the image a very crisp look, but then most times you need to do that in moderation. Basically depends on the feel you're going for actually. So the highlights, when you're dealing with the highlights, you're going to be affecting more on this side of the image. So let's look at that. You notice that the parts that is affected the most is actually these two boxes. Yeah, you see, it actually makes it white like the first one. So that's that. And then for the shadows, when you increase the shadows, you're affecting from here to about here, thereabouts. Those are the shadow. That's the shadow area. See, those are the ones that affected the most. Those three of them. And you have the whites and the blacks, the extremes. So when you're dealing with the blacks, you're actually going to be affecting this portion here, basically these two, more of those two, including the third one, the first three boxes actually. And that's basically what the blacks fader would actually do. And then the same thing for the white. The white is more on the extreme, more on the right extreme here. That's what it does. So you need to understand how these things work, because they are very essential to your color grading process, putting all those things together. And the clarity, you see this section is called the presence, the clarity. First thing we have under the clarity, the clarity has a way of finding the contrast points and then exaggerating the contrast points. That's why you see it works more like contrast, but then not really. You see, in the case of contrast, you see what it does. Overall image, on the luminance, the value of the whites and the blacks, you see that. But the clarity works in about the same way, but then it finds those spots where color variations are, and then it's enhances those spots. So you see, it gives you the same thing, about the same thing that the contrast does, but then on a more precise, level. Yes. So when you're dealing, you see, with the clarity, it makes your image pop real nice. See, everything stands out. It gives that kind of a HDR tone. Yeah, HDR tone, and we know basically what's the vibrance. Vibrance basically, gives us that coloring on the. Let's see. If we introduce some color there, good. Yeah. Now, if you notice, the vibrance is targeted around the mid-tones most times, while the saturation is basically everywhere, like all the overall image. It gives its own. They have this. Take it as your vibrance works. You could take it as your vibrance works more like in clarity, but dealing with the colors the same way clarity works, and then saturation about the same way. It just smears off the colors everywhere, but then the vibrance is more directed. So I hope you understood. I hope you got that. So I hope you actually got that we just went through. That's everything under the basic portion of Lightroom. And yeah, so I'll see you in the next class. Ciao ciao.